Call this meeting to order. First item for business, I'll ask General Manager to swear in our newest member, Mr. Steve Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I ask you to stand, Steve,
Yes, sir.
if you don't care? And repeat after me. I, Steve Long,
I, Steve Long,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully discharge
and will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of Director of the Clinton Utilities Board,
the duties of the office
of the Director of Clinton Utilities Board,
Clinton Utilities,
of the City of Clinton, Tennessee,
the City of Clinton, Tennessee,
which office I am about to assume,
which office I'm about to assume,
and that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and of the State of Tennessee.
and of the State of Tennessee.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you so much for your service. Sign that, and you can give that to Doug.
I'd like to welcome you, Steve, to the board. It's a pleasure to have you, and we look forward to your contributions, your voice, and your help with the guidance of CUB business. So thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing that there's not any public present, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. The minutes were dispersed and reviewed. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Hear a second.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Move on to item 5, approval of vouchers. Everybody has a copy of both April and May's vouchers. Do I hear a motion to approve vouchers for the months of April and May?
So moved.
Have a motion to hear a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Move on to the approval of monthly reports. I guess we're going all the way back to February and March. Wow.
We are, Mr. Chairman, and I wanted to make sure that you had copies of both, and Dudley is, I'm sure he has a few comments that he would like to share with you on that.
Sure. What you're looking at on your screen is the revenue and expense summary through March. So it's containing both the February and March statements. The electric department for the month of February had a net income of $340,000, and in March $149,000. That puts us $389,000 ahead of the forecast. If you look over here to the right where we compare to the budget, our sales are down quite a bit, but our power cost is down quite a bit also, which has saved us. But keep in mind that what saved us on that power cost is that long-term partnership credit. And had we not agreed to do that, our manager hadn't fought for that so hard and got TVA willing to do something to sign that, and we had not agreed, we would be paying another $774,000 to TVA. So by agreeing to that long-term partnership, that's what's pulled us out this year and made that margin hang there. Otherwise, with the sales down, with the mild winter, and the industries cutting back like they had even before the pandemic hit here in Anderson County, our sales would be, our margin would be way down.
You know, Dudley, the surprise to that, out of all the power distributors, I'm looking at about 154 now. 139 of the 154 have signed this contract. So 139 participate, although they came in at different times. And so we still have about 20-some folks, or 15, that haven't signed that contract, and therefore they don't participate in this credit. And to the chagrin of their ratepayers. You know, I just don't understand the reasoning behind that. I think they're thinking that I mean, this is, some of our neighbors here, are in that position. But I don't understand why they're not doing that, because it is real dollars every month to reduce their power costs.
Well, the flip side of it may be, Greg, they may not want to go into their board and tell them, oh, by the way, we've been leaving.
So much on the
On
table.
the table, I mean, you hate to say that, but there
Right.
are managers like that don't want to put the time and effort in. Maybe it's infrastructure. I mean, you guys obviously had a pretty detailed plan laid out to go into this.
We did, and we were the first, the very first to do that, because I worked so hard with TVA and Jeff Lash and his crew in order to provide the assurances that we need for the divestment of TVA, should that ever come, and the stability of rates, which, I mean, he promised me a 10-year flat rate, to the best of his knowledge and efforts. He's going to see that the rates don't go up, which we really appreciate, and that was one of the other factors. And the other is the fact that with this stability, TVA didn't have a horizon of 5 years out there. They had a 20-year horizon, which means that they could afford a longer view, which means that their cost, because they were guaranteed these contracts for this period of time, it should be easier for them to invest in long term and not have a risk premium associated with a short-term contract. So I see some of these others getting on. I just don't know when they're going to do that.
Well,
Some of them are big customers too, and some of them are small. I don't understand.
Well, some of them are progressive. I mean, we're looking at, Gibson is one, and Gibson we've always looked at as, they're our size, and they're very progressive, they do very well there.
I don't see how you can leave that money on the table.
I don't either.
The expenses, we're running less than we anticipated. I did add $150,000 to bad debts for this month, because when we started prepay, we had such a big reserve built up. We hadn't charged anything to bad debt expense since then, because our reserve has been saving us every year. But with all that's going on this year and the accounts being behind, I'm anticipating we're going to see some write-offs this year. So I just don't see any way around that. And,
so we make provisions.
We're making provisions for that,
Right.
is essentially is what we're doing.
Right.
So that, what you see in net income reflects, that's dollar for dollar expense coming out of there in a provision for bad debt.
Help me understand, is that pandemic related?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Because what we did, which, and I think it's the right thing to do, we immediately, rapidly made a decision once we had a full grasp of what we were looking at here. Folks were getting laid off left and right. We stopped all late fees. We stopped all disconnects. So folks were not, I didn't want them to worry about their utilities being terminated for non-payment.
We talked about it, Steve Combs, Director Combs, had voiced his concern, and I was glad to see that we had spoke. You and
Right.
I had spoken, and we knew that plan was in place.
Well, the ramping up of that thing started moving pretty hard. So I had to get TVA's approval to do that, which was the stopper factor when Steve Combs brought it up. We didn't have the authority to do that. Our contract wouldn't allow us to do that. So in conversation with TVA, and this is through our TV PPA organizations, we got TVA to agree to be flexible because we have to treat everybody the same, and we have to do it under the rules and regulations that we have. And the rules and regulations are you terminate for for non-payment. So once TVA gave us the authority to do that, then we immediately instituted that. But we track all the time. We track really by the day the number of customers. We've got 2,368 You know, we got 30,000 customers, 2368 that are in arrears, and in FlexPay, we've got 744 as of right now. We see, and then we extrapolate from that what we anticipate we're gonna recover, and then what we anticipate we're gonna lose, which is one of the reasons why we're gonna gravitate back to regular disconnects and late charges, but we won't do that until next month. And I'm gonna be sending letters out to communicate unless I get a different direction from you all. The reality of it is, we are going to take hundreds of thousands of dollars in write-offs on this. That is the reality, which we are prepared to take. But if we let this out to where customers get 2 and 3 and 4 months in arrears, then we're gonna force them to move because they won't pay it. It's cheaper for them to move. So you balance your responsibility to provide a way forward with this high bill that they have, without forcing them to feel like the only option that they have is to leave whoever they're renting from, they're gonna leave that and all the bills that associated, they'll just skate. So we don't want them to do that. But now that we're reopening back up and folks are getting back to work, we think it's appropriate time.
Are y'all gonna kind of continue to reserve some each month for a bid?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, we monitor that. Essentially, that's what we're doing.
Right.
We monitor and extrapolate what we think of all of these that we have, because we have so many customers that are, from $100 to $200 or less than 100. We're thinking we're going to get most of those back. We've got some customers that owe now over $1,000, and we're thinking that the likelihood diminishes with time.
And I think we all kind of talked to you probably about it. I mean, I'm like, if there's margin there to take, I'd book it now, because
Yes.
it kind of smooths it out a little bit. and it
Right.
gets you
Oh, well,
off
we do
like-
that.
I-
And that's-
yeah, I'd
that-
take it as long as there's
That's-
margin there, and if there's not margin there, you may still need to take it.
Right, well, that's why we
I think
went
you
back,
just keep
that's why we're doing that.
Okay.
Is to recognize that this is gonna be an expense to us.
Yep.
Our net write-offs last year were $50,000. The year before that were $20,000. And you go all the way back to before we had the prepay, we were into the $280,000 in net write-offs. So that program itself brought us back to where we didn't really have to expense anything. But with this, we're in a different ballgame.
I've seen a lot of people at the wall out here paying. It's just
Unbelievable.
through all this. It just brings me to tears. It moves you that people really trying hard.
We think that too. I don't think that, we were concerned that as soon as they heard we weren't, because we publicized it. As soon as, some utilities didn't disconnect, but they didn't publicize it.
Right.
We publicize it because the whole idea is to take the stress level off of our people. I don't want them worrying. This is one worry that we could take away from them. So we were concerned that was going to be a flag that we just stopped paying. But by and large, that's not the case. If we only have 2,300 traditional, which is not the flex pay, out of 30,000, that's all that we have that's in arrears. That says volumes, that the overwhelming majority. And then I think the majority of these folks, they have a legitimate problem. I mean, they're whatever their job situation is, I don't think we're being taken advantage of. Is the 5,000 words I tried to get out. That's what I meant to say.
And we're not planning to demand full payment when we start back.
No,
We're gonna make them call us and work some arrangement out, to where they're not building this huge amount that they'll never recover
Would it be
from.
appropriate in your letter to give them some advice about ADVAC and other places?
Yes.
That
Well-
they could go to for help?
Not only that, of course, a lot of these folks are getting the stimulus check, and we're suggesting that they take part of that to do it, but the whole idea is to call us. What I'm looking for is that they keep, once we get into June, they keep their current bill up. And then, for those that need it, we'll work with them within arrangements. We'll agree on what those arrangements are, where they can spread that. They need to make contributions to what their arrears are over time. But the idea is to call us, and then in that conversation, we can assess what best way to serve them in terms of aid. And again, we make contributions to ADFAC all the time. We also, TVA came to us and said that if you will put up to $10,000 to ADFAC, we'll match that. In other words, if you don't put up anything, we're not putting up anything. So we put up $10,000. So in our community, Anderson County, there's $20,000. Of course, ADFAC's thrilled with that, and they're a good organization. We've worked with them for years and years. What have we've given to them from customers and from employees, 350?
Over the years, 400,000.
400,000 over the years, right.
We're averaging about 25,000 a year now that they get from us.
Do we have you have like a charity policy or something that you go through, like an applicant? I know in the hospital world, we get people come in and can't pay their bills, and so we have a financial screening tool that a one page or nothing big, just what your bills look like, and you look at it and you go, God, they can't really pay the bill, and so of course on the hospital side we get a credit from somewhere, Medicare,
Right,
whatever.
right.
But I don't know if y'all have got like a
What
little.
we can't do, Steve, is we can't discriminate.
Right.
If we can't make that
I
decision
see.
that you can afford it and Zach can't.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of treat everybody the same. And then
Well-
ADFAC does exactly what you're talking about. They have to show a need to get assistance and stuff. ADFAC and LIHEAP.
Hey, Greg, is there a tickler in time that you're looking for as far as, getting back to normal policy and I mean,
June the
what
8th.
is the thing that's gonna,
Well, we're monitoring this daily. So assuming that the trend continues to where things open up, what will stop this if things contract and all of a sudden now we go from 32 cases in Anderson County to 180 cases in Anderson County, or, things are going to start and things start closing down again. That puts us, because we have the flexibility, we're nimble enough to address that immediately. But just for the fact that we need to get back, not only financially, but for the customer themselves, if they're in a situation where now they're back to work, they need to start making some contributions on the arrears of their utility bill, or they're going to be so far in the hole that we're going to force them to move. So I'm looking probably the first week, after the first week in June. I don't want to hit them on the first of the month, but starting back like the 8th, which is a Monday, that'll put us in full gear. But they're not going to be surprised, because every one of these people that are in arrears is going to get a letter. And in that letter, we're going to give them contact information to call and let them know that we hope that, we've been able to help them through this troubling time. But I've got a letter drafted up for our traditional payers and a letter drafted up for our flex pay payers, and then let them know that call us because the $0 to $100 folks are not going to have a problem taking care of that. But if you got any problem at all, then you call us, and then we'll work with you in order to help spread that out. But we have to have a plan. Working with you doesn't mean we forgive that amount, because we can't. We can't do that legally. We can't do that, and it doesn't mean that we're going to just give you a year, to have this thing paid off. But depending on your circumstances, we can give you some time, up to a limit.
moving on.
Okay, so despite all that, we are still, something wrong with my mouse. We are still ahead of the forecast by 389,000 for the year. So the electric department is still in great shape. Moving to the water and sewer department for February, the change in net assets was 29,000, and in March was 33,000. Year to date, the actual income is 425. We forecasted 259, so we're 166,000 ahead of the forecast in the water and sewer department. Mostly because our expenses are running much less than we had anticipated. That's all I've got. All I can say is both departments, even in this pandemic and all the bad things going on, both departments are financially sound right now.
Good.
That's it. On there.
Do I hear a motion to approve the monthly reports for February and March?
I'll make that, second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. All right. Project status reports.
Mr. Chairman, we have two projects that have completed since our board met last. They are the aerial cable on Martin Road and the Midway Drive lane upgrade. Both of those have completed. I've got two open work orders. One, the Kellytown line, it's an upgrade. We're going to a three-phase there, and that line is loaded. And we're also going to aerial cable on Rosebud Drive. Those are the two open. Everything seems to be working really well. Our crews, in my opinion, have done a spectacular job. We've even sent some to help other utilities in storms. It's just without complaint. We have shifted their times and staggered when they come in and when they leave, and we have no complaints. Not from, as far as I know, there's not one in the company, and we've done that to our service representatives. I mean, everyone here has made tremendous adjustments during this time, and we've had as much as 3 of our folks, including our director, because cars were lined up on the 4-lane. When we had our lobby closed, we've always had the drive-by open, that never closed. And they were out literally taking checks and bills so folks wouldn't have to wait in line. So we've bent over backwards to try to minimize the inconvenience to our customers, and our employees have done extraordinarily great things, in my opinion, to try to accommodate our customers, and all of that was done without complaint. So we're very proud of that. And our crews, especially in both electric and water and sewer, have been astounding. So other than those two projects for electric, we have those open, we're good to go. In the water department, Mr. Chairman, we've only have that one open project, and you recall we're doing some renovation on the wastewater treatment plant, some structural steel members that we put in, and that is complete. What we're waiting on now is the delivery of this special paint. And once that comes in, our own forces will do the painting in there. So that's all I have for the project status, unless there are questions.
Any questions? All right, let's move on to review of the preliminary capital outlay.
What?
I don't believe those projects require any motions or anything.
No, really, what we like to do is put something in your hand for a month so you'll see it. It's a lot of information to try to get all at once during budget, and that'll be next month. This is essentially, and we call it preliminary because we haven't finalized the budget, so I want to see how the numbers all tie together. In electric, for example, I've got $350,000, $250 for a right-of-way bucket truck, and $100,000 for a chipper truck and other equipment associated with right-of-way. Now, I don't know that I'm going to recommend that we move in that direction. I want a placeholder. Years ago, when I became manager, we had right-of-way crews of CUB personnel, and we determined that it was more cost-effective to contract that work out. And we've had a great relationship with Wolf, but we've had a lot of folks here. Wolf's been great to work with. They've got sold out, you know, and prices continue to escalate. I'm concerned now that if it continues to trend higher, that we may be in a better position to have our own people and our own equipment. And essentially what I want to do is put a placeholder in there, and when we're in contract negotiations, I'm gonna throw that budget out there and say, you know, we're prepared to go in-house if that's the case, because we're not going to allow these prices to escalate to the point where, you know, there's no end to it. So the reason we got out of our own crew is because and we saved millions of dollars. We calculated that. But there is a break-even point that if we're going to go over that and we see that that's the trend, then I need some flexibility to start back. And what I would do is I'm all about contributions. You make contributions every year because I'll need several crews, you know, and which means you need the equipment associated with that. And all of that would require a plan, a market plan, to a business model to make sure that those numbers work for what we would put into that in terms of what it would cost us for employees and the benefits and the equipment and the upkeep and everything associated with that, what makes the most business sense to do. And right now, contractors are still the way to go, but I don't know that that's going to stay that way.
Any questions? So the plan is we're gonna have a little more in-depth discussion.
The beef will come next month when the budget comes, because we'll see how this $6.6 million in electric, for example, how does that tie in with anticipated revenues and expenses? What does that do to our cash flow? Our capital outlay is essentially what do we do with our margin and our depreciation. Those two numbers should feed, because depreciation is not a cash expense. Those depreciations should feed back into maintaining and replacing the equipment. So when I see how all that marries back together, and then I'll make a recommendation to the board based on what our forecasted numbers are and how that ties in with the capital projects, to make sure we've got enough money to do this, or is what we're planning to do mission critical, where most of this is, is it appropriate to borrow money to do it? We don't anticipate that, but that could very well be what it comes down to, depending on how that everything lines back up.
And I don't know where y'all are on that, I filed away, but I was on the phone on an unrelated matter with the USDA in South Knoxville, in the Knoxville office. They would love to do utility loans.
Yeah,
Love it.
well, the good news about that, and what Dudley has been struggling with, the cost of money
Yeah.
is so cheap
Yeah.
that we're kicking around whether or not it would be better to borrow the money to do the capital projects, because the cost of money is so inexpensive.
Yeah.
That it may make more sense to do that, and that's what we'll recommend. We've got reserve. I mean, we've got a good reserve. I mean, we're financially, I don't believe we'll need to borrow the money, but practically, in business sense, it might be the wise thing to do, because we can get this. We can borrow money to do capital projects. If we borrowed $6.6 million, or whatever that number is, 6 million, then that would immediately increase our cash reserves, you say, and we would invest. We would invest money that's not capital related, which would more than offset, I think, the interest, and that's what.
It wouldn't today, because they're not giving any interest
But
today.
if we have,
In the future, inflation's gonna hit sooner or later, it has to.
that's what we'll look at.
But I know, like I said, I was on the phone with Kirk the other day, and Joe Woody, I think it used to be down South Knoxville, this is what they're wanting to do instead of rural hospitals, trust me, so.
Because we have a guaranteed income.
USDA, and the loans, they're at 2.75 right now you can finance it as long as you want, up to 40 years.
Yeah, we believe we could get it less than that.
And probably through TML, you probably get
Right.
cheaper.
Well, yeah, even better
Other
than
places.
that, right.
Any
That's
other
all I
questions?
have, yes.
Or Zach, he's probably got the money.
Yeah, people probably wanna talk to them. Anyway, let's move on to smart grid presentation. We've
Great.
long anticipation for part 2.
That is so great.
We were saving this for you, Mr. Long.
Well, the good news is that Steve has already been through part 1. I mean, as part of his initiation, we asked him to go through, and he did through part 1. So thank you, Steve, for doing that. So
It'll be that way for a while.
one could possibly say that he's now more up to speed than you, because he hasn't forgotten what he saw last week. And I'm sure that you, and I'm going to review just a little bit for you. I wanted to start out, and I don't want to talk too fast. There is a lot to this, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to sit through it, because I think it's empowering for you to be empowered with the knowledge, and instead of just throwing numbers out there, the backstory is important. This is one segment of it. It deals with our smart grid, but the part that it deals with is the virtual power plant, and that's only part of what we do, and I'll explain that. But I thought it would be a good idea if we reviewed a little bit to bring back to your memory what we talked about in part 1. You'll remember, I'm sure, that back in April of 2011, TVA moved from this end-use rate, which is KWH, to a demanded energy rate, which is KWH and KW. It was a big deal because it shifts the cost risk on these large peaks from them to us. It calculates a demand feature that heretofore we didn't have. So when you look at that little graphic in blue where it says energy KWH, all we paid for is the KWH that we consumed. And it didn't matter if you were at the top of the mountain or in the middle of the valley. You see, all of that rate was the same for KWH. So this graphic, which you'll smile at, I think the metaphor on this is water. We've got a burning house. It takes 500 gallons of water to extinguish that fire. Now, this $8 hose can do it in 100 minutes because it can pump 5 gallons of water out every minute. So we're looking at 100 minutes of time to put the fire out. The fire truck, the $575,000 fire truck, can put out 100 gallons of water a minute, so the fire gets extinguished in 5 minutes. You can see if your house is burning, you want the fire truck, you don't want the garden hose. But in terms of how that lines up with us, before 2011, all we were paying for was the 500 gallons. It didn't matter how, in what time period, or how quickly, or how much we needed. Whatever we used, all we had to do was pay for the energy of 500 gallons. After 2011, because the timing became a factor, you had to pay for that fire truck. Do you see? So there's two costs involved: the cost of the power in 5 minutes and the cost of the energy of the 500 gallons. You still had to pay for that, but when you use that, now has made a difference. So I tried to give you an example back from the metaphor of water back to electric of a 2,000 watt stack heater. Now you can look at a hair dryer, 1,800 watts, to give you an idea. If you rock a 2,000 watt heater on for an hour, that's 2,000 watts times an hour, that's 2 kilowatt hours. If it was at a 1,000 watt stack heater, it would be 1 kilowatt hour. The energy cost for 1 kilowatt hour is less than 10 cents. So for two, we've got 19.5 cents is what our customer pays us to run that stack heater for an hour. Now, if that comes on peak, it's the same 2,000 watts, but it's called KW. The timing is only within a peak time, and you don't have to run it for an hour, you can run it for a second. The demand charge on that is $10.35 per KW, so it's $20.70. So the customer pays us less than 20 cents, we pay TVA $20.70, unless it's in the summer, and then it goes from $10.35 to $11.30 per KW. So anybody knows that's not good business. We're not going to survive long getting less than 20 cents for what we're paying $20.70 for, and also we have to pay for the KWHUs too. So it's energy and demand. The demand portion of our wholesale power bill makes up about a third of our total power costs. And when you're running over $5 million a month in power costs, a third of that is made up of this demand component. So you can see it's a big thing. So that pretty much is the review to get you back up to speed between KWH and KW. Yes, sir.
I want the record to reflect that me and Mr. Combs are not costing you anything on hair dryers.
So good.
You need to deduct that off of mine.
I suggest when people make fat jokes that they don't include me in that. I'm going to assume that Steve doesn't need a buddy in that.
I knew
You
if
see?
he was saving money, he wouldn't care.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm like Zach since this happened. I'm saving a lot of money on shaving.
On razors.
I see no reason to shave.
That's right.
I'm glad that you all are having a good time because it's going to get tedious as we continue on.
I knew it would.
No questions on the review, right? All right. I need to go back to October of 2009 because I'm going to take you up. And believe me, it won't be a yearly thing. In 2009, DOE made $3.4 million available in stimulus funds because they had a sense that operational deployment of a smart grid technology is good for national security, it's good for the country. So they put $3.4 billion out there. Over 400 of the major hitters, utilities, tried to get that. TVA, Duke Energy, Florida Power and Light, Pepco, Southern Company, Con Edison, all of the big boys. Of the 400 plus that applied, only 100 utilities received any stimulus money, and TVA was one of the utilities that got stimulus money. And what they did is they did what they called a smart grid enterprise. In the smart grid enterprise, the first things they did was they built out their fiber backbone. Fiber is a key for communications, especially in dealing with smart grid. And you'll remember our fiber didn't cost us anything. We own dark fibers from Comcast because of the contract that we signed with them. No other utility in the valley has got that contract. And they can't cancel it, and they would like to do that, and we won't let them. We own those dark fibers. So TVA built out their fiber, and then they took that enterprise grid money and they designed a voltage regulation pilot, a pilot program for voltage regulation that they offered out to the power distributors. What they wanted to do is they sent out an RFI, request for information, to the local power companies. There was 158 at that time, in order to determine whether they had the infrastructure within their utility and the expertise within their utility in order to do what they called a demand response because it's all addressing the peak. When TVA peaks, is there anything that any utility can do to shape the load on their demand, which will in turn help TVA? So they sent out an RFI to the 158 LPCs And of the 158, and that number's moved because there's not 158 now, there's less than that now. But of the 158, 16 qualified to submit an RFP, request for proposal. What TVA said, okay, who can do it? And you're providing us with the information so we can determine through that. And when they went through it, 16 of the 158, they felt like had a shot at being capable of accommodating their pilot program for demand response. So Cub, we had already made significant investments into this cutting edge technology, like SCADA, which is required. You have to have that. We get that through a company called Surveillant, and it's supervisory control and data acquisition. Surveillant is worldwide. They're in 30 different countries. And we already had our AMI. And again, many utilities, Knoxville doesn't have even today, the AMI. Oak Ridge doesn't have that. You mean, they're not even at the meter, at the smart meter yet. They're deploying them, I understand, but they don't even have them fully deployed. So we already had these up and running. Our advanced metering infrastructure, and we bought that through Aclara, and that's our TWAC system. The problem is, we knew we had that, and we put that in the RFI. Once we qualified, then we immediately began the process to assemble the data for the RFP. And that was 38 detailed pages, scaling it out to give us a shot at working this demand response through this program. In that 38 pages was a statement that I had to commit, which I did. I committed CUB to provide the necessary manpower, expertise, and financial resources to fulfill the obligations set forth in the Smart Grid Initiative, which was their pilot program. So, what birthed out of that was this virtual power plant. Cub designed and built the first virtual power plant in the valley that incorporated these three legs: dynamic voltage regulation, demand partnership program, and direct load control. On November the 9th, 2011, we received a letter from TVA, and essentially what it did is it recognized and congratulated us on being the first of the 155, now we're down to 155 if you're counting power distributors, and we were applauded for our commitment to bringing the smart grid to the Tennessee Valley. And we were the first power distributor to be able to do that, and they recognize us as Cub has emerged as a leader in the smart grid technology. Consequential to that letter, they sent us a check for $3.3 million. That's because we were able to successfully demonstrate operational dynamic voltage regulation. The first to be able to do that. $3.3 million check. Now this virtual power plant is up and running, and you now see the following year, June the 29th, 2012, a very hot day in the valley. Cub was the first utility that TVA integrated into their power grid portfolio. They called on us to give them a demand response to help them shave their peak because they were dying, because at Nashville International Airport, the temperature measured 109 degrees Fahrenheit. June 29th, 2012. We did that. We helped them shave their peak. It helped us. It helped everybody in the valley, and we got paid for that. DVR, dynamic voltage regulation, is the largest component of our virtual power plant. The principles behind voltage regulation are not new science. The bottom line is, when you reduce voltage, you reduce electric demand. So, voltage regulation, and some call it conservation voltage reduction, CVR, is the practice of manipulating the voltage levels to lower demand as long as you keep that voltage in the standard, the ANSI standard, which is the American National Standard Institute for what the voltage needs to be. And because we were fully operational and a robust smart grid system, we had the in-house expertise to practice dynamic voltage reduction, and I'll tell you what that is and how that works. Voltage is a key, and we regulate that out of the substation. And by the time it gets to your house, what we call the last customer, it's affected by distance, by the primary feeder, by the distribution transformers, by the secondary conductor, and by the service drop. So what you get down to is, if you don't know what the voltage is at your house, everybody is the last house. It's 30,000, everybody. We need to know what the voltage is there. If you don't know what the voltage is there, then you cannot regulate voltage, because you're not going to give them the quality of service. You won't know that you're meeting this ANSI standard. The ANSI standard is 120 volts at the meter, plus or minus 5%. So we can go to 126 or down to 114 for utilization electricity. That's what we have to have at your meter. That's what we need to, that's quality electric at your meter. So if you don't know what's at the meter, then you have to have a high voltage in order to make sure you don't dip below the 114. You can't have it too high. So you got to stay within that. So before we can do any voltage regulation, we must know what the voltage is at every meter in our system, not just the last meter. And we must be able to communicate that to our voltage regulators. So that became the problem. Our AMI, our meters, they know what the voltage is at the meter, and our SCADA system is ready to regulate the voltage once it knows what the voltage is. So how do you hand off from the meter to the SCADA system? That was the real rub. NEAA, the National Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, they did a study, and they determined that the estimated cost per feeder to communicate between the meter and the regulator was about $150,000 to $200,000 per feeder to accomplish that communication. Well, the problem there is we've got 47 feeders. So between $150,000 and $200,000 per feeder is between $7 million and $9.4 million of what it would cost to get that communication off of the feeder from the meter to the regulator in order to do this regulation. Now, I read that study, and they did a marketing study to show where it was cost effective to make that kind of a financial contribution in order to have these efficiencies on your system to be able to regulate demand. But it was way, way out of our ballpark in order to do that. Now, where we got to is this Multispeak. Multispeak is a product that standards were set by utilities. We became familiar with Multispeak when our Central Service Association, who does our billing, once they started to provide metering products and inventory products, they do our payroll. I mean, they are a billing organization. In order to integrate what we had here at Cub, and now we're back to 2011, in order to what we had here at Cub, we had to have a product that would talk to them and talk to what we had already designed. So we use this Multispeak a lot. Todd and his group were all over this in the design of what it was necessary to interface between different products. Now, through Multispeak, we then got Clara, our metering folks, and Surveillant, our SCADA folks, together. We had many meetings here and neither Aclara or Surveillant had the technology to do a demand response. Neither one of them advertised or had a product that would speak to both the meter for voltage and the SCADA in order to regulate that voltage. So many hours, we designed and helped them design and write the code through Multispeak for those two products to talk. So now these are worldwide companies. We were the first company worldwide to utilize Aclara as a DVR function, and we were the first worldwide to use Surveillant. Now, both of them on their website advertise that they are demand response. They have a demand response package, and they sell it. What we got from them is obviously they didn't charge us. They didn't charge us to do this because we were the beta, and we helped them write it and design it. So everybody has an option to do that. They're still not doing it, though. Just so you'll know, I don't know of anybody that's utilizing that, because the fact that they have millions of dollars in SCADA that they'll have to put out there and these meters. So it was such a big thing. Surveillant highlighted Cub in a case study that they did in 2012, where it says, Clinton Utilities Board saves big bucks with Surveillant-enabled CVR. They advertise that now on their website, and they highlighted Todd Loggins as the interface between Surveillant, Multispeak, and Aclara. It's a big thing. I mean, it's a big thing. Big company, big thing. So all of that to say, well, that's great. What impact does that have? Is there a financial impact or a service impact? Well, it's a financial impact to Cub, what that means. Now, you're familiar with this graphic, I'm sure, and you get something like this every month. This goes back to January because that's when I did this. That this shows the difference between regulated peak and unregulated peak. There's a 7.4 megawatt difference. That's a big deal because 7.4 megawatts is 7,400 kilowatts, and they're charging us $10.35 per kW. And for this month, that's $76,590. So you'll see that number at the top of every sheet every month, what the savings are for that. And how that's determined, it's easy because we know what we've reduced. We know the amount of kW that we've taken off of peak. It's like taking a barrel filling up with water, and you start taking 1 gallon a bucket and pulling gallons out. You know how many you pulled out, so you know what would have been in there. That's how that's determined. That's why we know this is what we saved. And you can see this peak was done between 7 and 8 a.m. On January the 22nd. We activated at 6 a.m. That's when we started pulling tools out of our toolbox in order to start lowering that peak. You immediately see the drop. And then over here at 9 a.m., you immediately see where we relieved the requirement for peak shaving. All right. Stop me if you have a question. January, it was $76,500. In February, it was $81,178. So year to date, although it's more than that now because we've passed that, it's $150,000. But when you start looking at what we did last year, that's $778,000. That's $900,000. Go all the way back to when we started this in 2011 when it made a difference. We're at $6.3 million just in this DVR alone. That's the actual savings that it saved Cub. So, virtual power plant, DVR, $6.3 million. The Demand Partnership Program is a program that we designed and developed and implemented here. I don't know of another utility, although we've made this available. I know we made it available to volunteer. I don't know if they picked up on it, but other than potentially them, I don't know of another utility that's used this, although we offer it out because it's a win-win. What it does is that takes our general power customers, commercial customers, and we incentivize them by providing them money to help us shave our peak. Much like TVA disincentivizes us by charging us money on peak. So we were the first to do it, and as far as I know, we're still the only ones that do it. We have a 3-tier program for our customers, a 3, a 5, and a 10-year contract. Customers like Oak Ridge Hardwood does this, and ACWA does this, participates. Knox Utility does it, First Utility does it. I mean, we've got a lot of folks that do it, and they come in at different tiers, and we provide them with either $2, $3, or $4 credits on KW. It's a win-win for both of us. Not the big money as a DVR, but in January it was 15, and February it was 20. When we look at what it is over time, we're looking at $1.4 million in terms of reducing our power bill over this period of time. You know, a couple of $100,000 a year, we don't think is anything to sneeze at. Now we're up to 7.7 million. The last part, which is the least effective, but what it does is it includes our residential customers. It gives them an opportunity to participate in almost what you could call green power. This smart switch, we physically, literally put a device on the hot water heater at home. And if we're in a peak position, we'll essentially keep that electric hot water heater from heating water, which most of the time people don't see because it's not like when you turn the switch off, the water turns cold. So we'll give them a $50 credit, and a max event is 1 day, and the duration of the event maximum is 2 hours. So $50 for controlling a hot water heater, $25 for controlling a pool pump. We think it's a win-win. It saves us money, and it gives our folks money. Not a lot. $5,000 in January, $7,000 in February. When you look over time, $374,000. So between our DVR, our DPP, and our direct load control, over $8 million savings to date, which we calculate for sure on what that is. So, smart grid deployment. That's our DVR, DPP, that's our virtual power plant. We also have line loss reduction, which is another program, not this one, and our AMI and the time of use, which is another presentation I would like to do for you at one time. But in those three things, I can easily show you the uniqueness of what we do, which exceeds $30 million over this time period from April 2011 until today. That's all I've got. Do you have questions?
Our industrial customers,
Yes, sir.
I would imagine they're probably pulling in 220 or 440 volts rather than 115 for a lot of.
Oh, no, yeah. They're much more than that.
What do we cut them back to when we do?
We
this?
don't.
Oh,
We don't. This is residential only. That's why they need to be an industrial park. Because there is so much to this that because now you're dealing with amps, you're dealing with current, you're dealing with watts, and you're dealing with line, the size of the conductor, and what they utilize in the machines, their sensitivity. A lot of them have regulation within their building. They're so sensitive because as you lower voltage, you actually raise current. So the amps go up because the power stays the same. As you're going through that conductor, you got 100 watts going in, you got 100 watts going out. What changes, the makeup is voltage and amps, current and power, the power and the voltage. So when you regulate, because when you turn a light bulb on, a 100-watt light bulb is going to use 100 watts. What amps you got going through there and what voltage you got going through there is two different things. That's why it gets real bright and then goes off. You know, if the current is too high, you say the wattage is the same. So there's a lot to it. And that way, what we want to make sure, because everybody at the house, if we can bring 120 to the meter, all the appliances in the house are rated really for 110. That's why you get confused. Is it 110, 220, or is it 120, 240? You know, it's what's at the difference between what's at the meter and what's at the receptacle. Because there's line loss through there's voltage drop even through the house. So it's different at the meter than it is at your receptacle. And the appliances, all the appliances you have are rated at 110.
If I've got a small business downtown and y'all are feeding me three-phase or some high voltage, do they take part in this? Or do they lose voltage also?
Yeah. The only ones that don't lose voltage are the industrial customers. But the whole idea that we were committed to is that we were going to make it transparent to our customers to where they didn't see a thing. So you shouldn't say, as long as we're within that ANSI standard, that plus or minus 5%, so 114, 126, then all your equipment, you shouldn't see there shouldn't be any difference at all. I don't want to, if we lower the voltage, we lower the demand. So if we can run at 115 instead of 120, you won't see any difference at all, yet we're going to see a big difference in what that load curve does.
I was thinking more about folks who are using 220.
No, it wouldn't make any difference. 220 is essentially two wires of
Reduce
120.
both lines.
That's right.
Any other questions for great presentation? Can I ask you can you send that to us, please?
Sure.
There's some of that I'm gonna take out and share with council.
Absolutely. Do you want me to send you a PDF or do you want me to send you the PowerPoint presentation? Either way.
PowerPoint, please,
Okay.
sir. Any other questions before we move to other business? Any other business that we have,
I just wanted to tell you, and I think we've talked some about it already, about our COVID-19, what we plan to do, and how we plan to start back to our normal, whatever normal is, with the caveat that we are going to be cognizant of what the real world situation is. Should that deteriorate, then I will, and I'll let you know.
subject to change with
It is subject to
conditions on
change,
the
that's
ground?
right. And budget's next week, next month.
So, welcome aboard again, Mr. Long. What we do at this time is I'll just go around and ask if anybody has any saved rounds or anything they'd like to add. I'll start with Mr. Combs.
Have nothing, sir.
Good to see you, Steve.
I just wanted to thank you for this and for the planning that you've done in the COVID. It's obviously great leadership from you and your team, and that makes me feel good when I hear that we're one of the first or the first or the leader in the valley. So thank you for what you do. And
Thank you.
I think from what you have told us and how flexible our employees at CUB have been through all this, working at home and changing their normal, I think it would be appropriate if he would just convey from the board how much we appreciate our employees'
They'll appreciate that.
flexibility and dedication. Is that okay?
All
That
right.
we can send them a
More
message?
than okay, Madam Vice.
Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Mr. Clapp.
Said well, you just second it. Good job, Vicki. Y'all are doing a great job.
And Mr. Long, welcome
Yeah,
aboard.
this is just the cutting edge that you guys are leading the way in this industry is just, it's really overwhelming just to go over, for the first meeting, for me to see how you guys have really led the valley here in a lot of these efforts. And I don't think it gets enough publicity.
Unfortunately, that's the truth, and since you know Ernie Bowles, let me just bring that name up. The guy is a titan, and he was tremendously impactful through much of what we're talking about through here. Between him and Todd, it was a great team.
Mr. General Manager, may I ask that you would communicate to city officials, county officials, what our plans are, for the rest of the board to know I don't know, 6 weeks ago or so, Greg and I spoke, and I asked that Greg keep local community leaders and stakeholders, a lot of those that CETA board type of people, just let them know what we were doing, because I felt at the time we were best practices. And some of the things we were doing as it pertained to our crew, with some of our HR type decisions, how we were dealing with COVID, I felt that the city of Clinton, as well as Anderson County, as well as Oak Ridge, they all could benefit from seeing how we were doing it, because I thought we were doing it so well. And being privy to some other organizations, how they weren't really on the ball. So we did that. I had multiple community leaders reach out to me and say, hey, thanks, that was great. So if you could just sort of give them.
I'll do it.
I think communication, it's just key. And then just echo Madam Vice's comments from the chair. Appreciate our people. It's trying times, it's stressful times, it's unprecedented times, and it's a great deal of fear. And so what I hope we can do as an organization is the best way to fight fear is provide people hope. And through our forgiveness plans, through our compassion, through what Steve was already articulating 60 days ago, it's great to see that we've implemented that, and that our people should be recognized, and as you know, all first responders, and we're all in this together. So that's my closing comments, and I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.